Good Thursday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock in time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Browns wrapped up practice. Players will have a day off tomorrow. Then it will be the third and final preseason game at home against the Rams, and the starters will play some. We'll have more on that in just a little bit later. Kevin Stefanski, Browns head coach, was asked about the health of one of his rookie quarterbacks.
How did you see Shedeur kind of respond from getting back out there yesterday, and then do you expect him to play Saturday?
He's feeling better and better, so barring any setback, if he comes in not feeling good tomorrow, which I don't anticipate, he would play on Saturday.
I would say I learned life in a different perspective, and that's why I come here. I'm happy. I always got good energy because, I'm blessed to come out here every day. Regardless of the situation, regardless of anything, I know my time, whenever that is, I'll be ready for it, and I'm going to embrace that. But in due time, I got many things I need to fix, many things I need to work on, and I'm not oblivious to that. So all I look at it as I'm getting more time to cook. I'm getting more time to warm up. That's all it is.
So it'll be interesting to see when Sanders enters, when Dillon Gabriel enters the game in that preseason finale. Browns radio analyst Nathan Zagura, what he saw from Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, two rookie quarterbacks in the preseason.
Both showed the things that you liked about them in college. Shedeur, the poise, the ball placement, the calm in the pocket, the ability to layer his throws. All of those things, we saw it. Throws for 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. He was sensational. And then from Dillon Gabriel, it's operate an offense. It's put your team in position to succeed. Led 3 scoring drives. He threw for 143 yards in the first half. We had basically 200 yards of offense in the first half.
Yeah.
300 yards passing, 286 yards passing, 400 yards of offense. That's good. That's good. The turnovers, obviously bad. Everybody knows that. First start, but if you looked at it and said, were there the things that we saw on tape with both of these guys that made us want to make them Cleveland Browns? You betcha. And that is encouraging, and that's good. And it's not one at the expense of the other. They're going to compete. They're going to compete. And at some point, I would imagine at some point probably this year, both of them will get opportunities in real games that matter.
Yeah, last couple of years you had 4 and 5 quarterbacks play, so why wouldn't you think that would hold true again? Longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi reacts to the news that Kenny Pickett will not play in the preseason finale.
He's not practicing, and the coach revealed he's not playing in the game Saturday. Why?
Usually when they do that, there are 2 reasons why. Either they already have some trade feelers for him and want to preserve his health and not risk him worsening that issue. That's option 1.
Wow.
Option 2 would be he is more hurt than they've let on and could be headed to IR. I still think, the option of keeping all 4 is still there. The IR option is there. The trade option is there. So I'm really interested next week to see which one they choose.
And it'll be interesting to see if Kenny Pickett is, in fact, a Brown once the final rosters come out. There have been some trade interest. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Damon Wolfe will join us, as will Fred Greetham. Lance Reisland will be along tomorrow with some film breakdown. So a lot planned. Browns also made some roster moves. They placed linebacker Nathaniel Watson on the IR with torn biceps. They also signed wide receiver Chase Cota, linebackers Marvin Moody, and Charlie Thomas, and waived running back Toa Tua, the guy they signed from the UFL. But again, Watson, IR torn biceps, so a tough one for Bookie Watson. Had played pretty well. Greg Cosell, NFL Films, talked about what he has seen on film with Isaiah Bond, the guy that the Browns signed earlier this week out of Texas and Alabama.
I did him 2 years in a row. I did him in Alabama when he was a vertical player because he has great speed, and then at Texas when he wasn't really used that much that way. A lot of tunnel screens, a lot of shorter throws. He's a guy that I wonder where he would have been drafted. He wasn't if the character was 100% clean. Because I remember when I did him, and then I looked at all his measurables are almost to the letter exactly those of Jalen Waddle. Now, I'm not suggesting he would have been a top 10 pick, Ross. None of us know that. but his measurables are exactly the same, and he can run. So, again, the character issue is pretty severe because he was arrested before the draft, if memory serves me correctly. So, we don't know. The Browns are obviously looking for receivers because right now their top two are Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, who's unproven. And after that, I think they're searching. And even with Tillman, you don't know yet at this point in his NFL career. So we'll see. I mean, the character was, I think, the main issue with him.
Plenty of Browns talk ahead. Let's turn our attention to the Guardians. Looking for a series win over the Diamondbacks in Arizona. Parker Messick called up from Columbus, making his major league debut, and it was a good one. Messick pitched into the 7th inning, 6 2/3 innings, gave up 7 hits, just 1 earned run, 1 walk, and he struck out 6. When he left, Guardians had the lead. Guardians up 2-1 in the 9th inning, and some trouble here. Lourdes Gurriel for the Diamondbacks. That one's not coming back. Deep to left field. He ties the game up with the home run in the bottom of the 9th. 10th inning, Adrian Del Castillo is the batter, and it's a little bloop shot, but it's misplayed. Quan can't get it, shortstop can't get it, Diamondbacks get it. 3-2 is the final. Guardians 3 games behind the Mariners for the final wild card spot. Royals are also a half game ahead of the Guardians now as well. Day off today before they open up a 3-game series on the road against the Texas Rangers. Slade Ciccone scheduled to get the start against Nathan Eovaldi. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report, is up first. Want to tell you, though, just a day now away from high school football starting, Friday night high school football starting. And you can join us on Friday Night Huddle, Rock Entertainment Sports. It's the place to go for all the scores and highlights from across Ohio. Join legendary head coach Chuck Kyle and I. Friday Night Huddle from 9:30 to 10:30, Friday nights on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We'll take your phone calls, have all the scores and news and highlights from across the state of Ohio. Friday Night Huddle at 9:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. Head to watchrockentertainmentsports.com, watchrockentertainmentsports.com for channel and programming information.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state, so come on. Great games wait for you and me, Ohio. Light it up. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
Browns are up first on Sports4CLE. Earlier today, Kevin Stefanski with his thoughts on the final preseason game. It's at home against the Rams on Saturday, and how the team will approach it.
I was pleased with how energized those guys were. Very competitive, finished with the 2-point plays there in a competition, so well done. And then we'll set our sights on Saturday at our place. Looking forward to the opportunity for our football team to get out there and play some football in front of our fans, which we've been on the road these last 2 weeks. So excited to get down there to Huntington Bank Field. We'll play our starters in this game. Depends on how the game flow goes, but between 20 to 25 plays, there will be some guys that get out of there a little bit sooner than others. But it's really individualized plan for each guy. But you will see the starters out there.
With that, let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. And Fred, that's, I guess that follows suit with what they've done all training camp, more of a traditional thing and a departure. Starters didn't play a lot last season, so just your thoughts on the change.
Well, this whole week was a little different from years past. They approached it as a regular season week with practices, which was a little different in the past. Once you get to the regular season, the media is only allowed to see stretching and individuals and report on it. that's the same thing starting this week. Although they let us watch practice in its entirety, but we weren't to report on it. So it's kind of like a hazy area there. Some news came out and so forth, but yeah, I think that was the mindset from the coach. He wanted them to be in preparation and with the mindset of a regular season game. And that's what they did. They went through the whole thing. Today was like a normal Friday during the season when they play on Sunday. With the game on Saturday, they had more of a walkthrough today, and then tomorrow they'll be off, just meetings, and then the game Saturday. So I like the approach. We'll see if it pays off, as they get going into the regular season. But that's the approach, and I like, that you're going to see some of the starters. In fact, all of them except the ones that have been injured. I think Denzel Ward won't play, and there's a couple other ones. But I kind of expect Myles Garrett to play some. He didn't say anybody wouldn't play. He said some would play less than others, and I can't imagine, too much because all you want to do is get your work in, kind of finish on a positive note if possible, and then get ready for the season. You don't want to get anybody dinged up in this game.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see. We haven't seen that a lot before. Greg Cosell, NFL Films, his thoughts on Joe Flacco being named the starting quarterback.
My sense is if Kenny Pickett did not get hurt, the battle would have been between Flacco and Pickett. I think the other stuff was just a lot of noise. Flacco, you know what you're going to get with Flacco. First of all, he runs that style of offense, which is quarterback under center, play action. That's what Flacco has done a large part of his career. Obviously he's an aggressive thrower, so there are times where he makes throws that you just, you go, why'd you make that throw? But then he also still has the ability to make phenomenal throws. To me, this was not really a surprise announcement. Once Pickett got hurt, I pretty much figured it would be Flacco. No team, contrary to what people think, goes into a season saying, well, you know what, we don't care if we lose games and, we'll see what happens then next year in the draft. No team thinks like that, Ross. They're trying to win football games. And there's no question at this point in time that Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to line up and compete.
So I play that from Greg Cosell because I know you wrote an article about Flacco saying he feels as good as he ever has. Take us through that article and kind of what you found out.
Well, I think he was, talking about his arm. A lot of people have you deteriorated. You're known for the big arm, and he just felt like, he feels like normal, like he always has, and he still feels he can play at a high level. I mean, we've been talking all off season on these shows, and I think I wrote and I told you I expected Joe Flacco to be the starting quarterback when it comes to season, regardless of what they were saying. I know they like Kenny Pickett, and they said he had the inside track, but I really thought when it was all said and done, looking at this starting schedule with 6 games to start, kind of a meat grinder, if you are serious about trying to win, he would give you your best chance. You can work Pickett in if you decide, to keep him and have some packages for him. But by and large, I think your best chance is Joe Flacco. He says he's up for it. He's ready. He's excited for the opportunity. And, and I think that's really it. Like Cosell said, it was never really seriously that Gabriel or Sanders were in line to be the starters. They told you that with the draft position. When you take a guy in the 3rd and 5th round, you're not expecting them or you're not anointing them the starter come day one. Could either of them start this year? Absolutely. And both of them have grown, but I think it's been Joe Flacco's job to lose since he got here.
So here's another question for you. Running game's going to obviously be really important. How do you see the carries getting divided up between the running backs, and how long before you think we see Quinshon Judkins? Have you heard anything more about contract signing, league suspension, any of that news?
No. Kevin Stefanski was asked that today after practice. He said nothing, no news, from his front. It's probably more the Andrew Berry question, but I'm sure that they have discussions and updates, but I think I've said all along this is a big thing. He was a big factor in their plans. I mean, you take a running back 36th, you move on from Nick Chubb, especially those first 6 games. You really want to run the ball and take pressure off your defense and your quarterback. And right now, it looks like kind of what they had in the past. Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, and Dylan Sampson. Wasn't here obviously as a rookie, but I think that Ford will be the first guy up, and Sampson will be maybe the change of pace back, and maybe even Strong will be. So I think it'll be more of a committee. And as far as the legal front, I saw a tweet, I think, put out by Adam Schefter, which I think must have come from the Browns or somebody, saying they're not in a hurry until they get a little more clarification from the NFL. In other words, I think they're waiting on the NFL to come down with he's going to be suspended 6 games or he's clear before they, enter into getting his contract done, because that makes a big difference. And it looks bad to sign the guy and then he's suspended for 6 games. So that's what I think's going on. Isaiah Bond, I think they waited. They got some type of indication, I think, from the NFL that he was not going to be suspended. They signed him immediately. So that's what I think's going on. Could be wrong, but we'll see how it plays out here.
What have you thought? And I know we haven't seen the starters. We'll see them a little bit come Saturday. What have you thought about the offensive line? In my mind, they have to get that right, and it looks like they're kind of moving down that way if this offense is going to have any success.
Yeah, I think if you're going to have Joe Flacco out there, you want to have the line out there as well. I don't know if they'll play beyond Flacco. I don't know if they would put the backups out there if Flacco's still in the game. Again, I think they're trying to get into the flow of it, get in, get out, have a positive, success story on Saturday, and then get out and rest. But I do think that's a key to this year, is that offensive line, is going to be as healthy going into the season as they've been in a while, with Conklin and Posick and Teller and Batonio and DeJuan Jones. And you want them, to get you off to a good start. The guy you brought in, you were hoping to be your key backup, Cornelius Lucas, is out with an ankle injury, so you don't know when you're going to get him back. So, all things being said, the offensive line will get some work, look good, and then that will be the linchpin to this offense this year. If they can open up a little bit in the wide zone and they can get some running game going, I think that'll go a long way in the play action pass and the style of football that Joe Flacco and Kevin Stefanski want to run.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I can step aside, take a quick time out, other side of the break. We'll hear from Mason Graham, first-round draft pick. Head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Head coach Kevin Stefanski asked if he was pleased with the Browns' training camp intensity.
Yeah, I've definitely I felt their urgency. They felt mine throughout since we've been back, going back to April. We don't, in our minds, training camp doesn't end until September 7th. So we're constantly trying to build on what we've done the day before, Zach. So, but I've been really pleased with the mentality of these guys, and it's something that continues to grow. It's never a finished product in that regard because, as we all know, it's a long season.
Fred, you've been there every day, including today. Was this drastically different than previous Kevin Stefanski training camps?
I think it wasn't drastically, but there was more purpose. There was a little more up tempo, in the practice sessions. Everything seemed to have a reason, a purpose. Even going back to the OTAs, they started out running from drill to drill and just kind of more of a high energy approach. And I think he sprinkled in some live tackling, which we hadn't seen before. Wasn't a lot, but there was some to the ground. Most of it was more thud or a hit, initial hit. But I do think that just even this week of regular season schedule, kind of getting them focused on that opener and getting them ready for that regular season instead of just kind of showing up and playing a game. So I think they have been more intentional, and I do think there's been more of a deliberation in what they're doing.
Yeah, they need to come out. Last year the beginning was not. It was horrible. They need to be good off the rip come week 1 against the Bengals when they start counting. All right, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hello, gentlemen. Mr. Flacco's been named starting quarterback, which he should have been last year. But, of course, the comment by Mr. Berry and two-time Coach of the Year said that they wanted no confusion in the quarterback room. So what's changed? There's 4 guys in there that, yes, they named Joe Flacco as the starter, and once again, he should be. But it seems to me like this organization, including the Haslams, does not care if we win. All they want is the fans' money. So pay the money and just don't worry about the confusion that there might be, because we're not trying to win. Boy, this is totally disgusting. Goodbye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Our pals from Rochester joining us. I do believe they want to win. I don't think you spend the kind of money that they did, $230 million guaranteed on what you hoped was a quarterback. Now, you can argue that it hadn't worked out. In fact, it hasn't worked out. You can't say that it has, but to say they don't want to win, no, I'm not buying that. That doesn't make sense.
No, I mean, there's ways to spend a lot less money, make a lot more money if that's what your goal is. I mean, they're spending money left over, hand over fist out there at the facility, redoing it. They're putting up, they've already broken ground on, I don't know if it's a new media center, a medical facility, hotel. I mean, they're spending a lot of money. Sure, they want to have, but I think as far as on the field, I mean, if you were just wanting to make money, NFL owners make money before the season even begins just on the TV contracts. You surely wouldn't have the highest payroll in the NFL or near the top. They've spent more cash in the last 5 years than any other NFL team in upfront bonuses and so forth. So I'm not defender of the Haslams, but I think that's they want to win. Now you can criticize the way they're going about it,
yeah,
for sure. But I don't think it's because of lack of money or lack of effort in wanting to win. If they really don't want to win this year, throw out Shador or Dylan Gabriel from day one. They might find their way, but I think your best chance, at least for the first 6, 7, 8 games, is Joe Flacco. He's been there, done that. If he falls flat on his face or you lose anyway, you can turn it over to the young guys. But they're trying to win, or they wouldn't even brought him in.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have signed Myles Garrett. They'd have traded him for draft picks. So, I understand fans' frustration. I really do. They're looking at it and they go, we win 10 games, we win 3 games. We win 9 games, we win 5 games. There's no consistency. So I get why fans are upset about it. First-round pick Mason Graham asked about his growth throughout training camp and where he's seen his biggest improvement.
Yeah, I feel like I can just show my progression, since I've got here until now, it's always a progress, especially coming into this defense. New style and just kind of picking up the technique still, but it's getting better week by week. Probably just I had to change my whole stance, and then I'd say more get off too. I used to not really, get off the ball as fast because it was a different defense. I was more reading, so it wasn't launching out the ball. But I'd say probably my get off and stance and stuff.
Fred, I can't wait to see Myles Garrett play next to him in a game because I think the two of them, and then you throw Malik Collins in there. I think this defensive line is going to create some problems, no matter who they play.
Well, that's what they're counting on, and I like what I've seen of Graham. I like what I've seen of Schlesinger. I've said it. If those two guys can hit the ground running and play up to what they're built, there's going to be some learning curve, obviously, as rookies. But I don't see why this defense cannot get back into being a top 10 defense. A lot of them, I asked Myles Garrett that yesterday, and he said that last year it was just some leaks, some lapses, and that was some of the reasons why they fell off. And I hearken back to those first 7 games. They played well enough in 5 of those 7 to win, but the offense, couldn't score more than 16 points, and that's why you were 1-6. So you add these 2 rookies. Sure, you lost a couple key parts as well in Emerson and Hicks to retirement and JOK to injury, but I do think that the ingredients are there with that defensive line to really be strong. I mean, they traded away who I thought was an up-and-coming young guy they drafted last year in Jawan Briggs. That tells me that they feel very good about where Graham's at, Collins at, Shelby Harris, and then that they think Michael Hall's soon to be returning. So I do think that if they can get that inside play, it would only help Garrett. You saw the Panthers double teaming Graham in the first game of the preseason. Obviously, Garrett wasn't playing. So that tells you already what they were thinking of him. So you can't double team them all. And they double team Garrett. I think Graham has a chance, to have a big year as well. So all the way around, I think it bodes well. I'm kind of anxious. I think that's the path for the Browns to get off to a good start to be successful is playing good defense.
All right, before I let you go, what are you paying attention to in the first preseason or the final preseason game?
Well, I want to see Gabriel and Sanders. Haven't got to see Sanders since the first game. I like to kind of see them side by side playing. I do want to see the first team offense, see if they can put together a drive or two and move the ball. But I think more than anything is I'm concerned about the secondary, especially cornerbacks. I mean, now you have Ward with Denzel Ward. Greg Newsome just came back to practice, and he fell on his shoulder 3 weeks ago, and they said he was day-to-day. Well, he just came back, and so when the coach says Denzel Ward is day-to-day, does that mean day-to-day like you and I think, or day-to-day maybe a month from now? But they don't have much behind Ward and Newsome, what I've seen. Cameron Mitchell has been beaten in the preseason games for touchdowns, and it's him and Miles Harden are the next 2 guys up behind Ward and Newsome. So what I would like to see is, somebody I didn't name step up and play well. Or I think the Browns need to either claim, a roster cut on a team at cornerback, or make a trade for one, or sign one of the guys still available. Last I looked, Asante Samuel Jr. was still unsigned. He's only 25. Probably cost you some money, but he's there. A couple other ones as well, even a veteran like Stephon Gilmore. So I think they need some help. But again, it goes back that defensive line. If they can get to the quarterback, that'll make everybody in the secondary look a lot better.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Appreciate you hustling back and joining us after practice today. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much, Fred.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. Have a great day.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Always really good Brown stuff. We're going to step aside and take a quick time out. Spencer German, 92.3 The Fan, and the Locked On Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to Go Forward. Back to learning new things. back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little flag in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me. The Ohio Lottery. Put a little flag in your day. Put a little flag in your day.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve. Because I am a future leader of this great nation. I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity. A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Browns have wrapped up practice before the third and final preseason game. Players will have a day off tomorrow. Then it will be a home game against the Los Angeles Rams to wrap up the preseason. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
In 2023, the Browns went 11-6 with a trio of quarterbacks of P.J. Walker, Deshaun Watson, and DTR before Joe Flacco came along and won 4 out of 5 games. But there's been a lot of pundits who are saying the Browns might only win 3 games again this year and be the second to the worst team in the league. But is this team really that much worse than the team that went 11-6 and made the playoffs? And they only had Nick Chubb for a game and a half. And it seems like the running backs the Browns have this year are at least just as good as the running backs they had that year. So I really don't see the Browns being as bad as what they were predicting. To me, I'd rather have Gabriel and Shador than the trio of quarterbacks I mentioned earlier.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. It's going to come down to the offensive line. Can the offensive? One of the reasons some of the national people are so down is the offensive line is getting towards 30, and they didn't play well last year. They were in a different scheme, and they're not looking at that. People that are saying, the Browns aren't going to win many games, looking at the offensive line, looking at the skill positions, and they're saying there's not much there. There's a lot of young guys that would have to come through. The defensive line, though, has been dominant. And if you have a defensive line that is dominant and you win on the line of scrimmage, you have a chance to be pretty good. Let's welcome in Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Locked On Browns podcast. Spencer, appreciate you hustling in from practice in Berea and joining us. The question that the voicemailer had was relative to, is this team really that much worse than the one that went, to the playoffs a couple of years ago?
Yeah, listen, I think some of the Vegas numbers on win totals and all those different things are somewhat disingenuous, especially for a team that a year ago was in the Super Bowl conversation as even maybe like a dark horse candidate or a team that people thought was at least going to get back to the playoffs. And, I've seen some stuff this offseason. I think PFF at one point did like a ranking of all 32 rosters, and the Browns were 32nd. And I'm like, where does that come from? I don't understand. I think this team has more talent than I'm not saying it's a lot of teams, but I think there's at least a handful of teams that they have a better roster than. So I think it's easy when you were 3-14 last year and things looked as bad as they did for people to just kind of pile on and say that, that the Browns are going to be awful and they don't have a chance and they're completely out of it. Now, I'm not going out and saying they're going to be a playoff team. I think they have a lot of work to do in that regard. I think there's still a lot of flaws on this team. I think it's pretty obvious that they need to get younger in some areas and try to rebuild. But, I've been pretty steady in believing that if with how bad the offense was a year ago, if they're competent on offense, and I think that's what Joe Flacco being named the starter that he was this week, I think that's what him as the quarterback brings you is competence. Then why can't they win even 3, maybe a few more games than that than they did a season ago? So listen, I'm not going to sit here and again predict the playoffs for this team. I'm not going to go that far, but if they are more competitive this year, if they surprise people early, maybe they get off to a hot start, and some of these teams that early on, like the Bengals and even the Ravens last year started 0-2, maybe some of these teams get off to slow starts. Maybe they steal a couple of those games during that opening stretch that everyone's worried about. And then maybe they put themselves in position where you at least get to December and they're maybe showing up in the hunt graphic. You never know. So we'll see. I still think there's enough flaws that I'm not, overly confident in this group, but I think there's enough talent there as well that if those guys kind of rise to the occasion and the quarterback plays steady, then they can maybe surprise some people this year.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. The defense is going to be a problem for offenses, defensive line. So that'll give you that'll keep you in some games. All right, I know you addressed this on the Locked On Browns podcast. How long of a leash do you think Joe Flacco has to start the season, and when do you think you might be seeing Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, fill in the blank rookie quarterback?
Yeah, I sort of mapped out those first 6 games as the stretch that I believe Flacco kind of gets here. And I guess that could change if things go really poorly in the first 4 of those games and the Browns are 0-4. We know what's been reported on how this team feels about Kenny Pickett and their belief in him and why they brought him in here in the first place. Certainly you could see them maybe pivoting a little bit sooner, assuming that Pickett is okay at that point, which I believe he will be. But I've kind of mapped out those first 6 games as kind of the Joe Flacco portion of the schedule. And depending on how he comes out of those first 6 games is what determines whether or not he stays the starter beyond that, or if they decide, okay, it's time to pivot. I also think the math could change on that a little bit if they don't have Kenny Pickett. Like I'm sort of going into this predicting and feeling like they're going to have 4 quarterbacks. And so that first 6 games, if things aren't going great, or even if it's less than that, having Kenny Pickett there, it's an easy veteran to pivot to be like, all right, this is our chance to maybe try to save the season, if you will. Is kind of how I'm viewing it. And then once you pivot to the rookies, I think it then becomes it's less about like trying to save the season or salvage what you can of the season, and it becomes more about like, all right, we just want to evaluate these quarterbacks. And so you need to figure out when you pull the plug on the idea of trying to win, essentially. I don't know exactly when that's going to be. It might be after those first 6 games if things go really, really poorly for this team. Not that I think they necessarily will. I think they can navigate that decently and maybe come out of it 2-4 potentially. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think you're probably looking at seeing the rookies a little bit later. I think the earliest you see any of the rookies is probably that Dolphins game. Once you get through that early portion, that's pretty difficult. I think, even something like the Raiders game in mid-November or late November feels like another spot where you could start to see them pivot to the rookies again. And I think it all kind of depends on how many quarterbacks you keep and for how long you keep these quarterbacks. Because I'm assuming that next week they keep all 4. And I'm assuming they start the regular season with all 4 on the roster. But, sometimes teams get injuries and they'll maybe pick up the phone and give the Browns a call and try to trade for one of these guys. And then we'll see what kind of happens from there. But I would probably bank on later in the season seeing these rookie quarterbacks.
All right, before we go to break, Browns signed Isaiah Bond to a 3-year contract, undrafted because of sexual assault charges that have been, they know billed, so they basically dropped him, so we don't have enough to prosecute. Bond only had 99 catches in 3 years at Texas and Alabama. Are you concerned about that lack of production? I mean, that's one of the things. I get he's fast. I keep having horrible flashbacks to Anthony Schwartz. Now, I think he's a better football player, but the last time we went and got a speed guy, it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, I think that's well said because I've sort of said the same thing. Is that there's always this idea that teams feel they need to draft a speed guy, and because of the elite trait there, right? Teams tend to during the draft fall in love with the elite trait or traits that a guy has. We see this with quarterbacks a lot too. And I always just wonder if that's always the right move. Like, look at somebody like Anthony Richardson. He had these great traits. He was a freak athlete. And now Daniel Jones is being chosen as the starting quarterback over him as he goes into year 3 of his NFL career as a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. It's just crazy. And so I think the same thing sort of applies to these wide receivers. So often teams fall in love with the fact that a guy is really, really fast. And they see that as this opportunity to tap into something and get another weapon in their offense and a deep threat and all these different things. But then rarely does it turn out that guy ends up being like the elite receiver that maybe some hoped. So I have my doubts too. I think the production, like you brought up, is concerning because I always like to say, like, yeah, the traits matter, but what did they do in the role that they were in on the team that they played for? And he was considered a number 1 wide receiver, at least last year at Texas he was, and didn't produce like a number 1 wide receiver. I know he missed a couple games due to the ankle injury, and that sort of held him back a little bit at times, but it wasn't so serious that I don't think we saw enough tape on him or anything like that. Like he played still in pretty much every game that Texas had last year. So I think it's the production piece along with the trait piece. It's all part of the puzzle when you're evaluating these prospects. I saw somebody shared a list of players that were similar stature and ran a similar 40 time or better 40 time than Isaiah Bond did. And the list didn't have a ton of names on there that like make you think this is going to be some diamond in the rough type thing. I think that the 2 best players on there were like Tyler Lockett and Deshaun Jackson, which if he turns into one of those guys, great.
Yep. But
the rest of the list, it had like, I don't know, 25 different guys on there, 20 different guys on there, was pretty lackluster with like anywhere from Marquise Goodwin to Anthony Schwartz being on there as well. So I think you're right. I think it kind of is like it has the chance to either be a home run, which is more unlikely, or just a big swing and a miss.
Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan and the Locked On Browns podcast and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little defense and what to expect with the 53-man roster, final preseason game. Sports4CLE, be right back.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me, the Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day, put a little play in your day.
We continue talking Browns with Spencer German from 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Browns on SI and the Locked On Browns podcast. Spencer, how good do you think this defense is going to be? And I know you also kind of, on Locked On Browns, you talked about the concerns with secondary, and yeah, I get that.
I think in general, the secondary is maybe the biggest concern. I take that back because linebacker, I actually was somebody who was saying early on in training camp that I thought linebacker was better than people were giving it credit for. But with Jordan Hicks retiring, I think that sort of threw a wrench into things. Now we got the Nathaniel Watson news, obviously, today that his season is over, so that takes away some of the depth that you might have thought you had. I still think in general that group has a chance to be pretty good. Carson Schwarzenegger obviously stood out. And I liked the Jerome Baker sign. I know he had a bad year in Miami. I'm kind of hoping it was just kind of like a scheme fit for him, but he's a guy that I think has shown throughout his career that he can be rangy. He can do a little bit of everything. He's pretty instinctual. So we'll see what that group looks like. Maybe the weakest group on that side of the ball. But the secondary, especially with Martin Emerson Jr. done for the season, took a big hit. And now you're dealing with a lot of younger guys that are just kind of unproven. I think we've seen throughout the preseason that after Greg Newsome, There's just not a lot of guys you can count on from the cornerback group at this point. I think Cameron Mitchell's had kind of an up and down training camp, so I don't know that you're like really banking on him being an elite player for you. I also think like the Browns ultimately might keep 5 safeties just because if they're not using a nickel corner, they tend to put 3 safeties out there. And so they might just want an extra body in that group just to sort of make sure that they are they have some options and they're not just banking on like certain players or relying on certain players if they don't feel like they have enough. So the secondary is going to be interesting. I think the beauty of it is we know there's kind of this symbiotic relationship between the secondary and the defensive line. And when the defensive line is as good as the Browns, I think, is going to be, they might not have to cover as long. And that maybe bails them out a little bit and masks some of the deficiencies they might have in terms of players on the back end of things. So we'll see. But I think in general, yes, this team is going to go as the defense goes. The defense is obviously going to go as the defensive line goes. And that group, I was blown away by what things looked like in Philly, how dominant they were against the defending Super Bowl champs, obviously. And it felt like, that was a sign of what's to come sort of for this group just in general. And if that group dominates, they'll have a chance to be in a lot of games this year, even against teams that people think they don't have a chance against. So we'll see how it all kind of translates to the regular season. But certainly looking forward to watching that defensive line go to work. I honestly think it might be the best defensive line that Kevin Stefanski's had in his tenure here. And I say that understanding they've had some other good defensive ends opposite of Myles Garrett, but I don't know that the interior guys have been as good as sort of a duo as I think this group is going to be. And I think Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire are sort of ready to step up into bigger roles, each of them, even if they're not, even if they're not Zadarius Smith level in terms of being like a sidekick to Myles Garrett. I think the sum of their parts is probably better than what we've seen under Kevin Stefanski to this point.
Who are some guys you think could surprise, both offense and defensively, that end up on the 53-man roster?
Yeah, I am curious about if Gage Larvadan on the offensive side of the ball is going to make the 53-man roster. I'm leaning at this point towards he will. Sorry about that. I'm leaning on this point that he will make the 53-man roster. So that's somebody on offense that has had a tremendous camp, little undersized, and on the roster bubble. But I just think because this wide receiver room isn't very deep right now, they don't have a lot of talent at that position just in general, I think there's probably room for him to make it. I actually think staying on the offensive side of the ball and staying with the skill positions, I wouldn't be surprised if Amani Marshall made the 53, at least initially, over Pierre Strong. I know Pierre Strong has that special teams prowess that he sort of brings to the table here, but I just think Amani Marshall's looked better throughout training camp. Now, there was a report from Diana Rossini today that the Browns are sort of looking around, exploring options to potentially, add to that room. So we'll see what that looks like. I think that also maybe suggests that Quinshon Judkins isn't going to be back anytime soon. So what they do at the running back position will be interesting. On the defensive side, I'm curious to see what happens on the at the defensive tackle spots, because the Juwan Briggs trade yesterday, it made some sense. It felt like a math problem to me. That like basically, hey, we know we can't keep everybody in this group, so let's get a draft pick and sort of increase our draft position a little bit by trading a 7th and him to the Jets. But I wonder what that means for maybe somebody like Aiden Huntington, who I think has had a couple decent preseason games and shown some things. Are they going to keep 5 for now until Mike Hall comes back, and then maybe he becomes the 5th guy? Like, does Sam Kamara have a place on this roster? I think Shelby Harris is pretty much guaranteed to make it. So how many guys they kind of keep in that group? The defensive line group in general is so deep. Like, there's a couple of guys that maybe could surprise us and sneak in there, and we'll sort of see what that ends up looking like as well. But yeah, I think those are a few names that kind of pop up on the radar. I don't think they keep more than 3 tight ends, but there's been just a boatload of those guys obviously participating in camp, and we've seen some flashes at times from Brendan Bates and Sal Cannella, but I think ultimately that group ends up being just David Njoku, Harold Fannin Jr., and Blake Whiteheart. So yeah, I think those are some of the names that we're talking about in terms of guys that are still sort of fighting for roster spots here going into this final preseason game on Saturday.
Yeah, and I'd watch, again, you always watch special teams, because if you're out on, and that's one of the reasons I think Huntington could make it. He can play as a D tackle. He can run down and tackle people on special teams. And that's always The back end of your roster, if they're not quarterbacks, they got to be able to do something on special teams. What are you paying attention to? We found out starters are going to play some. What do you want to see from the starters in the final preseason game?
Yeah, I just want to see them be able to move the ball effectively with Flacco. Similar to what we saw in Philly last week during the joint practices, if they're able to just kind of get up and down the field a little bit. I also, specific to the offense, like, I want to see what this run game looks like, because I think day 2 against the Eagles, you started to see the run game be a little more effective than it was on day 1, and maybe the most effective it had been all camp. We know, like I said, Quinshon Judkins, don't know when he's going to show up, and that sort of throws a wrench in their plans at running back just in general. So understanding that, like, you don't have him to maybe mask some problems that you maybe hoped when you have like a standout back at that position. And so, can they produce what's needed from an offensive standpoint to sort of build the offense around that run game that we know is going to be so pivotal to their identity? So I want to see at least the early remnants of that and kind of what that looks like. And I think defensively, just can the secondary, especially with Greg Newsome out there, it doesn't sound like Denzel Ward is playing on Saturday. He obviously wasn't at practice today yet again. So, and I think that's fine, honestly. Put him in bubble wrap. I honestly don't even need to see like Miles on defense, if we're being honest. If they put Joel Bitonio in bubble wrap, if they put Jerry Jeudy in bubble wrap, I would be okay with it, because frankly, like, that's a position group where you just can't afford to lose your top guy. But yeah, I think on defense, seeing what the secondary kind of does and how they use different players in different roles, especially, like I said, without some of the depth that we were hoping for. And Greg Newsome coming off this shoulder issue that he's been dealing with for a couple weeks, like, what does he look like as he's playing outside now instead of in the slot? So just some of the things I'll kind of have my eyes on. And obviously a few individual guys like Huntington, like we mentioned, who maybe are fighting for a roster spot this last week, to sort of see what I think my 53-man roster prediction, my final one, will look like come Sunday.
Spencer German, is always great stuff. Appreciate you hustling back from Berea to join us. Make sure you check him out, 92.3 The Fan and the Lockdown Browns podcast. Thanks, Spencer.
Of course, anytime, guys. Talk to you soon.
Spencer German, make sure you check him out, 92.3 The Fan. We're going to take a quick time out. Damon Wolfe, In Motion Football, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You got so much to do, it's got you feeling blue. Put a little play in your day, 'cause it's fun all over the state. So come on, great games wait for you and me. The Ohio Lottery. Put a little play in your day. Put a little play in your day.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve. Because I am a future leader of this great nation. I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome Damon Wolfe from In Motion Football into the show. Damon, let's start with Kenny Pickett. You think he gets traded? Possibilities? Just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a real possibility. I'm not saying it's 100% probable, but I think that, the Browns, carrying 4 quarterbacks isn't very tenable for what they want to do. I know that the message that's been public facing has been quite different than that. But to me, I think that Gabriel has shown you enough, Sanders has shown you enough that they can be counted on at some point this season. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but I do believe that you could possibly see, an attempt to trade him if they get an offer that they like.
They did trade one of those defensive tackles that we had talked about. A lot of depth there, and they've looked. The young guys have looked really good. What did you think of the Jawan Briggs trade to the Jets? And they went out and got another defensive tackle in a separate trade yesterday. So the Jets are bringing in 2 D tackles.
Yeah, they were really aggressive in trying to address a need. I don't like the Briggs trade, to be honest with you. I think that, he has a skill set for the defensive tackle room that is needed. And I think, he's not that great of a pass rusher, but he is disruptive and a force in the run game. And I think that skill set is certainly something that the Browns could have used this year and years to come. So I would have rather preferred them, possibly move on from a player like Shelby Harris. But it does clear the path for another young player that I'm pretty excited about in Aiden Huntington to possibly make the roster.
Yeah, we were talking about him last segment. That's guy that runs down and makes plays on kickoffs. Wearing 6. I mean, can you imagine seeing 66 running at you as a return man?
It certainly stands out when you watch when you're watching the game. It just jumps off the screen at you. And he can certainly be that kind of like what Winston Reed was last year, but the difference is Winston Reed is a linebacker. So it's pretty incredible.
All right, let's talk a little bit about cornerback. That's obviously a concern with Emerson going down. Cam Mitchell really has struggled, I would say, kindly, in the preseason games. What do you think some of the options are at cornerback?
Yeah, well, what we thought was a strength, there certainly is question marks now. So unfortunately for the Browns, the options aren't that great. There aren't that many of, talented cornerbacks on the, 5th or 6th spot on depth charts. But there is one that I think stands out to me, and that's Joshua Williams from Kansas City. He had some success early in his career as a former 4th-round pick in the 22 draft and played well at some points. And he's also tall and fits the mold of kind of what Martin Emerson was. He's 6'2", close to 200 pounds, and is comfortable playing some press man corner. So I think for the Browns scheme, and he would fit very well on the outside if they want to bring him in.
Let's talk a little bit about the 53-man roster. So next Tuesday they have to get down to it. Who do you think are some guys that could get those last couple spots on that 53-man roster?
So yeah, I think the last couple spots, that's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Of course, I'm rooting for Gage Larvadan to make the team, and I think he certainly has earned the right to be on the roster. We'll see what they do with Deontay Johnson in that regard. But then on the defensive side of the ball, I look at the battle between Cam Thomas and Julian Okwara for that 5th end spot. And, Thomas, I really believe the coaching staff really likes him, and he's played well. But also Okwara has really flashed and come on, as somebody I didn't really expect. I thought maybe he'd be more of a practice squad guy, but I think he's kind of earned a good look to make the 53 as well.
All right, we found out today that the starters will play 20, 25 snaps. It'll vary. There'll be an individual plan, as Kevin Stefanski said. What do you want to see from some of the starters other than no injuries? Because that's first and foremost.
Yeah, so for me, I'll be paying really close attention to the starters on the offensive line. I want to see that they can they're capable of giving Joe Flacco time to throw, because I think that's the most important thing for this offense. Joe isn't the most nimble guy back there, so, creating plays when pressure's around is not going to be something that's going to be his forte, as we know. But if they can give him some time, he can still sling it, and that will give the Browns some success, or the ability to have some success week 1 against the Bengals.
When you look at Flacco, is it just a matter of smooth, put together a drive and then get him out of there?
I don't know. For me, I would maybe like to let him get a chance to get a little bit of a rhythm going. I don't know if he plays that entire 25, 30 plays. I didn't really get a chance to hear Kevin speak today, but I do think that maybe closer to a quarter is what I would expect to see him out there, and hopefully get a chance to get into a rhythm with some of his receivers.
All right, before I let you go, when you look at how the Browns divvy up the workload from the running back room, and I'm not speaking in just, I'm talking to begin the season. How do you think that shakes out? We really don't know how that's going to work just yet.
Yeah, I still am hopeful that they can get Judkins in by week 1, but if that doesn't happen, I think you're really dependent on Jerome Ford. And Dylan Sampson has split that load. I do think that they are in a position. They need somebody in more of a style of Judkins, a physical downhill runner. Maybe Amani Marshall can sneak his way onto the roster to begin the season until Judkins gets back or is able to play and fill that role. But I think they need to do something there. But I would say that it would be primarily Jerome Ford and Sampson getting that workload, maybe kind of like a 60-30 split, and then maybe 10% of carries, short yardage situations going to a back in the mold of Marshall.
Dan Wolfe from In Motion Football, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Damon.
No problem, Dave. Anytime.
Make sure you check him out, Damon Wolfe, In Motion Football. Really good insight about the Browns as well as the entire NFL. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.